Afternoon and welcome to session 7. Quick frame before we start because today's session has a twist the others didn't. So far, every session has been about adding capability, an identity, a memory, connectors. Today is about power tools, writing your own commands, spinning up subagents, and getting your agent to work for you on a timer. All genuinely useful. But this is also the one session where I can do you harm, because the easiest mistake from here is to build something far too clever and then sit there at 11 p.m. wondering why it's broken and unfixable. So the spine of today isn't more power. It's keep it simple. I'll show you the tools to do that. And the single most important thing I'll teach you is when not to reach for them. For anyone watching the recording, you're not behind. There's nothing to build live in the room. Replicate at your own pace and email me anything that breaks. So here's the shape of today. We'll start with the frame, keep it simple, the inner and outer harness, then the heart of it. 3 power tools taken one at a time. First, /commands, the built-ins worth knowing, and then the trick of writing your own. Then subagents, helpers that take a job off your main agent's desk and hand back just the answer. And finally, scheduled jobs, getting your agent to work for you on a timer. We'll close with your homework and a quick look at next week, the last session, which is moving from runners to builders. So the arc is frame, then commands, subagents, scheduled jobs, and wrap. And the thread running through all of it is the same one word. Keep it simple. Same as always, a quick vocab check. Hands up if you'd happily explain it to a friend. 2 recalls from previous sessions and 2 for today. The recall I most want, and it's the one that keeps tripping people up. What's the difference between a terminal session and a Claude agent session? They look the same. Both a window with text, but they're not. And it matters again today. The terminal is just you using your terminal. The agent session is when you've started Claude inside that terminal and you're handing instructions to your agent to run with it. Knowing which of the 2 you're in is the distinction that keeps catching people. And from last week, what's an MCP server? It's the protocol that links your agent to an external service, email, calendar, whatever. Remember, I called it the USB-C of connectors. Every company has its own API, and MCP is the standardized layer that sits in the middle and negotiates between your agent and that API, so you don't have to know the specifics of how each one likes to work. And then today's 2. First, cron job, and Roger, this one's yours. You asked me in an earlier session, and while I knew it was a scheduled task, I didn't actually know what cron stood for, so I looked it up. Cron is just the old Unix name for the thing that runs jobs on a schedule. The name comes from chronos, Greek for time. A cron job is simply a task set to run at set times. That's the concept. And as ever, you need the concept, not the plumbing. Your agent knows exactly how to set one up and how to make it survive your machine restarting. The technical bits, system D, launch agents, whatever, are its job, not yours. And second, subagent. The way to think about it is a helper agent for your main agent that does a side task so as not to distract the main agent from its focus. We'll dig into that properly later today. I reached out to a few of you in the week. Apologies, I wasn't as proactive as previous weeks. I had to spend some focused time with my agent helping me understand various Army rules and regulations and write an appeal document to try and keep Ryan in the Army. From the conversations I did have, it seems a lot of you are now up and running. Regular conversations with your agent in the terminal, email and calendar connected, and several of you through to the Telegram agents and trying out the AI training MCP server. So a lot of you have really done your homework this week, which I'm very happy about. Let me pick up a few questions and issues from those conversations. Richard, you had the AI training MCP server connected and asked about the session 1 notes, which weren't previously included. I've now added those and made sure the session 6 notes are in there too, so we're fully up to date across all sessions. I'll add the session 7 notes by the end of today. Great that you're using it. And while we're on MCP servers, the big question I posed last week was, what's my MCP server? What data or expertise do you hold that someone else's agent would want? Richard, you mentioned that your agency has a genuinely unique way of working, a method you call co-create. And when you asked your agent what your unique edge was, the agent said that's the thing and then offered to write it up, pages and pages of it. Now, what your agent wrote there has a name. It's a product requirements document, a PRD, and that matters because it's a perfect tease for next week. Session 8 is about turning you from runners into builders. And the PRD is the very first step in that process. So Richard, your co-create method is going to be your MCP server. Hold on to those ideas, because the whole of today is not just about how you'd make one of those real, but how you make it simply. One blunt question before we go on, hands up honestly, is your agent actually saving you time, or are you fighting it? I'll confess there's a learning curve. I've brought you up to speed on about 3 years of intensive AI development in the space of 7 weeks. So I'm expecting you're still finding your feet. There's a hump to get over before the streamlining really kicks in. Tiffany, I know you are still wrestling with your email agent. Let's set up a dedicated one-on-one and get that document in place so the agent's saving you time, not costing you it. A couple of specific fixes worth sharing because they'll catch others too. Mandy was struggling with her Telegram agent, finding it one-sided, messages sending fine from Telegram, but no response back from Claude. Don't worry if you had this. I struggled with exactly the same thing. The fix, you need a dedicated session open on your desktop or laptop, started with a specific channels flag. The command is Claude, channels plugin.telegram Claude plugins official. Once that session's open, the Telegram agent responds immediately. And if that channel accidentally gets closed, just open it again with the same command. You're straight back in the conversation. And one from Liesel and Marius, who share the same Claude Code account. Suddenly, Marius's agent had access to Liesel's email, and things got muddled. If you're sharing an account, the fix is simply to name each email account explicitly, the same way I've got a personal and a work account, and I tell the agent which one I mean. Get the naming right, and it routes accurately to the right inbox. Before I show you a single power tool, let me tell you about a conversation I had with Nathan this week. And Nathan's been building his agent full of enthusiasm, which is fantastic, but he'd packed an enormous amount of complexity into it very early. And it got to the point where it didn't quite work and he couldn't see why. So we sat down and spent the better part of 2 hours doing the opposite of building. We refactored it back, stripped it down to something simple, a clean loop, a few skills, a clear structure, and then it worked. There's still one item I owe him, a size limit on the identity files being loaded by the hook, but even with that, his identity files still load when they're needed. That's the key lesson for today. Before I've shown you anything, the complexity you can add is not the same as the complexity you should add. At the risk of boring you with it again, here's the mental model I need you to hold. There's an inner harness. That's the Claude Code loop itself. The model, its tools, its context window, running in a loop to reach a goal. That's already enormously powerful, and you didn't build it. Anthropic did. Then there's the outer harness, the bit you build on top, your identity files, your skills, your commands, your structure. Everything good you've made so far lives in that outer harness, and it works because it's simple. Today, I'm handing you a larger set of tools for that outer harness, your own commands, sub-agents, scheduled jobs, and the warning that comes with them. The moment you bolt on funky steps and clever loops, agents calling agents calling agents, it starts doing funny things and you can't debug it. That's Nathan's 2 hours. 1 or 2 of you told me last week you'd built something you couldn't untangle either. That's what we're avoiding. So at the risk of sounding a bit cheesy, power with restraint. Reach for the heavy tool only when the simple one genuinely can't do the job. And if you've already overbuilt, come and find me. I'll happily run a little simplify session like I did with Nathan. Remember my mantra, I don't want your agent to become a black box. I want you to understand conceptually how it works, even if you don't follow every bit of the detailed plumbing. And don't imagine this only happens to beginners. When I built my very first agent back in October last year, I had a whole crowd of agents all running different things, and I ended up having to go back and refactor the lot. I'm probably on my 3rd version of my setup by now, so refactoring isn't failure. It's completely normal. Don't be afraid to strip something back and rebuild it more simply. The thing to hold on to is this. The LLM itself, that inner harness, is so powerful that the outer harness you build really doesn't need much complexity in it at all. Now, onto / commands. You've been using them all along. I've shown you quite a few already. I'll show you some of the built-in ones first. Then we'll move on to the ones you build yourself. Every time you've typed /rename or /color or /resume, that's a / command. They ship with Claude Code. They're shortcuts to things it already knows how to do. There are a lot of them. /help shows you the full list anytime, so I won't drown you. I only know and use a handful myself. Here are the ones actually worth knowing, grouped into some useful categories. The first group I call keep the session tidy, and you'll recognize a few because they're the good hygiene ones I wanted you to prioritize. /clear, a fresh start that keeps your identity loaded. /compact, summarize to free up the context window, or using our terminology, freeing up desk space. /context, how full is the desk right now? /resume, pick up an earlier session. /rename and /color to label and color your terminals, vital once you've got 4 or more open, and /exit, a clean exit that fires the session end hook, which writes your day to memory. The next category is steer the agent, /model, swap the model for the job, /MCP, your connectors from last week, /agents, manage sub-agents, more on that shortly, and /permissions, decide what it's allowed to do without asking, a good one to know. And the third I call find your way, /help, the full list of all the /commands, /skills, the skills your agent has. You will recall we already had the skill to build a skill included there. /hooks, your configured hooks, including the ones we built for the session start, pre-compact, as well as session end hooks, and /usage, showing your session cost and plan usage. Let me make a couple of these real rather than just listing them. First, /context. This shows how full the desk is right now. Then /clear, which gives me a completely fresh start. And when I run /context again, look, the desk has been wiped clean. But notice I'm still me. It cleared the conversation, not who I am. While I'm on /clear, a very good question Roger asked. If you run /clear, does it wipe that history out of your daily memory log, the summary of everything you did that day? No, it doesn't. That history is still stored in what's called a JSON file, which is how Claude keeps a session on disk. It's kept for 30 days, and the session ID will still pick it up. So clearing your context doesn't lose it from the memory we built. Good question. And /resume, if I run that, it hands me a list of my earlier sessions, and you'll recognize some of the ones you set up in previous Bob sessions. Pick one and you carry on exactly where you left off. Now let me make /model real, because there's been some news about a new model release. If I run it, you'll see the different models, and each is good at different things. Something cheap and fast for a simple job, that's Haiku. You don't need a sophisticated model to do something simple. Sonnet is the good middle ground, capable and right for most everyday tasks. Opus was, until 2 days ago, the model for the most complex tasks. And 2 days ago, I'm not sure if you saw, a new one was released called Fable. That's the one reserved for the hardest, long-running work, roughly twice as fast as Opus, though it gets through your usage limits quicker because the harder task naturally burns more tokens. So choosing the model is really about understanding the task you're handing your agent and matching the model to it. And one of you has already put Fable to work. Alison built a comprehensive contract risk register in Excel with it, and in her words, it did something that would probably have taken me a month in 30 minutes. She also ran out of credits by 6 in the evening, which is exactly that trade-off with the heavy model. So save Fable for when you genuinely need it. And /MCP, you'll know this one from last week. This simply shows which MCP servers you're connected to. There's my list, and you can see our AI training server in there, among others. I won't dwell on it, but it's a quick way to confirm your connectors are live. Now /usage, I can see how much I've got left in the current session before I run out. I know a few of you have had a bit of token anxiety and had to wait through the cooling off period before giving your agent the next task. I also like to look at my stats. My longest session was open for 17 days, and I've consumed about 28 million tokens. Anyone catching me up yet? Don't memorize these. Just remember /help shows you everything, and the full annotated list is in this week's notes. Now /master prompt, you've been using that one since session 5. Is it in the built-in list? No, because I made it. A /command is just a markdown file with an instruction inside. In your project, there's a .claude folder, and in it a commands folder, and in that a file called masterprompt.md, and inside that file is the instruction. The / is just a shortcut for go read that file and do what it says, which means you can write your own for any workflow you do more than twice. Quick orientation, because this is where your power lives. That Claude folder has 3 subfolders: hooks, code that runs automatically, like your memory hooks, skills, capabilities your agent reaches for on its own, and commands, the slash commands you fire on demand. Open yours up, that's your inventory. Everything we build today lands in one of those three, and on a Mac, that folder's hidden. To reveal it, hold Command and Shift and press the full stop key, or you can just list it in the terminal. I'm going to build one I actually need. All course I've told you, I write a brutally honest retrospective after each session. What worked, what flopped, what to change. And until now, I've typed that whole instruction out every single time. Let me fix that. I could handwrite a file in .claude commands called sessionretro.md with the instruction in plain English. But in reality, I'll just ask my agent to build it, and it knows to put it in the right place. So, Bob, help me build a custom slash command for the retrospective I run after each AI training session. It should review this session's transcript and write a retrospective, what actually worked, what didn't, what surprised me, what to change next time. Be brutally honest. I want the flaws, not flattery, no praise unless it's earned. There, it looks at the existing master prompt command for the format and writes the file into .claude commands as sessionretro.md, which is nothing more than a prompt I don't want to retype. Now, I won't run it here. There's no live AI training session on Bob for it to chew on, but in practice, after each real session, I just type /sessionretro and it writes the whole retrospective for me. The instruction I use to type out every single time is now one word. And notice the line I baked in, be brutally honest, not complimentary. That's the real value of a command. You bake in how you want the job done once, so you never re-explain it. Left to itself, it'll tell me I'm wonderful. I'd rather it told me the truth. Some of you who've started building skills will be asking the obvious question, isn't a skill just a recipe of repeated steps you don't want to re-explain? So what's the difference? Simple rule, a command is something you fire deliberately by name when you want it. A skill is something the agent picks up on its own when the conversation calls for it. You never type its name. So deliberate and on demand, that's a command. Automatic and context triggered, that's a skill. And the rule of thumb on whether to build one at all. Typed roughly the same instruction 3 times. Make it a command. Done it once. Don't. That's the over-engineering trap. Simple beats clever. The next power tool is subagents. Earlier in the vocab check, I said, think of a subagent as a helper for your main agent that does a side task so as not to distract the main agent from its focus. 2 key points. First, when I say side task, I mean a genuinely focused bounded task. Your main agent hands off a set of instructions, the helper goes off without needing regular interaction, does the job, comes back with an answer, and then disappears. Second, and this is the real win because it's a new agent, it gets its own context window. Let me put that in plain English. Remember the desk analogy from an earlier session. Your context window is your working memory, and a cluttered desk gives worse answers. A subagent is like handing a colleague a single well-defined task on a separate desk. They go off, do the one job in their own clean space, and hand you back just the answer, not all their mess. Your desk stays clean. And as you'll recall, a main agent with a clean context window gives you far better answers. I typically use subagents for 2 reasons. First, to keep my main agent's context clean. A big, messy job like reading 30 files to find the one thing I need or trawling 50 websites for a piece of research happens over there with the subagent and only the result comes back. I don't want 40 irrelevant websites cluttering my main agent's desk. I just want the summarized answer loaded back in. Second, to explore options in parallel, fire off several subagents at once to evaluate different options. What would 3 different approaches look like? 1 helper per approach running side by side, and you compare what comes back. I use exactly this in my risk management platform. There's a process called stress testing where you look at extreme but plausible future scenarios that could cause a bank to lose money. I send 1 subagent to explore climate change, 1 geopolitics, 1 macroeconomic disruption, and a couple of others. Each comes back with a scenario, and we test the portfolio against them. Here's one that ties to what we've built all course. I'll ask my agent the following. I have 3 areas of interest: home automation, AI, and running. Spin up 3 subagents to research the latest web articles for each in parallel, then collate them into a summary document for me to read. And while though, notice what isn't happening. My own session isn't filling up with 30 files. The helpers absorb the mess. I just get 3 tidy sections back. There's the digest in my outputs folder. It even flags what to act on and tells me it verified each item against live sources and dropped one it couldn't corroborate. Here's where people hurt themselves. Sub-agents feel clever, so you start using them for everything. Agents, spawning agents, and then something's wrong 3 layers down and you cannot debug it. Default to a single loop. Reach for a sub-agent only when the job is genuinely big or genuinely parallel. Most days you won't need one. I use them quite sparingly myself. Marius asked a good question here. Why use a sub-agent at all? Why not just open a second terminal window and flip between the two? Because the point is that your main agent is in the middle of a bigger task and needs an answer as part of that task. The sub-agent does the messy research on its own desk and hands back just the summarized result, which flows straight into the bigger job the main agent is working on. A second terminal is a separate conversation. A sub-agent is a helper inside the one you're already running. And one more thing, you don't always have to spin one up yourself. Your main agent will sometimes recognize that a sub-agent is more efficient and do it on its own, often during the planning phase of a large task. This raises the obvious question, given the line we've used all course, your chief of staff is your first employee, so when do you hire more? Be careful with the metaphor. A sub-agent isn't a new employee, it's a temp. Your chief of staff brings one in for the afternoon and lets them go. No memory, no identity, gone when the job's done. A genuinely separate core agent, its own identity files, its own memory, its own desk, that's a real second hire, and you only want one when you've got a genuinely separate world. A lockdown work agent kept apart from your personal one, say. For almost everyone in this room, the right answer for a long time is one chief of staff who brings in temps as needed, not a payroll of agents you have to manage. Last tool, and maybe the nicest, everything so far happens when you're at the keyboard. A scheduled job makes the agent work for you on a timer. In fact, Roger preempted me at the end of that last demo. Couldn't you also schedule that so it just runs every morning? You stole my thunder, Roger, because that's exactly where we're going next. One thing people get wrong, so I'll say it before the demo, there are 2 flavors of scheduling. One runs in the cloud on Anthropic servers, great for things tied to GitHub or your connectors. But here's the catch. It cannot see your local files. Your Vault lives on your Mac or your Windows machine, so a cloud schedule can't read it. The other runs locally on your own machine, and that one can read and write to your computer. For everything we care about, your client files, your notes, your master prompt, it has to be the local one. A quick don't be fooled, you'll spot a /schedule command in the list of Claude /commands. Fair warning, it sets up the cloud kind, the ones that can't see your Vault. For what we're doing, ignore it and use the local route I'm about to show you. A callback first. We actually built one of these together earlier in the course, a weekly digest that pulls in my calendar. Now this one's a cloud schedule. It reaches my calendar, which lives in the cloud. So it produces the digest happily enough, but it lands in the Claude desktop app, not in my Vault. I still have to come and copy it across by hand. And that's exactly the limitation. I mean, a cloud schedule can't write to your local files. Here it is in the desktop app, a name, the instructions, the timing, quietly running in the background. But for anything that needs to land in your Vault, you want the local route, which is what I'll show you next. One reminder, a local job needs your machine awake to run. Same 3 options as last week. Leave the laptop on, a Raspberry Pi, or a small cloud box. And for the keen ones, there's a more hands-on route using a scheduled command in the terminal, which I'll demo for you in a minute, and which is supported by a guide in this week's notes. The desktop app is the simple path for everyone else. That digest you just saw in the Claude app was one I'd already set up. But now let me create a new one live. And as Roger suggested earlier, the best thing of all to put on a timer is the agent improving itself. You all know the master prompt command. It reviews your recent sessions and proposes updates to who you are. Watch now as I ask my agent to put that on a schedule. Bob, I have a custom / command called master prompt, which I currently run manually. Please, can you set up a schedule to run this automatically at 10 p.m. each Sunday evening? Notice it asks which approach I want. I'll choose local, which will set up a LaunchD job on my machine rather than the cloud. And there's that word Launch D, remember, you don't need to know the terminology, your agent does. But I want you to understand it conceptually. A cron job is just a small program running on a schedule, and Launch D is the bit that makes sure it survives a restart. When you reboot, it brings the job back at the right time. From now on, my agent quietly keeps itself current with how I actually work. Agent proposes, I approve, but the best part is now I don't even have to remember to run it. And there's the confirmation. The job's installed and verified. Every Sunday at 10 p.m., a headless Claude session runs the master prompt review and writes a proposal into Bob Vault for me to look over. That word matters. It proposes. It doesn't just go and change things. I read the suggestions, pick the ones I like, and then have a conversation with my agent about which to apply to my user.md, my soul.md, my goals.md, my claude.md. I don't want to accept them all blindly. I want to stay in the driving seat. So it prepares and I decide, and there's a bigger point. Scheduling doesn't just save keystrokes, it makes your agent proactive rather than reactive. You may recall the accountability task I built that runs 3 times a day, 10 a.m., midday, 4 p.m., and checks in on me against what I said I'd do. I'm not prompting it, it reaches out to me. That's the real shift. A scheduled job turns your agent from something that waits for you into something that nudges you, a heartbeat that keeps it ticking along, all on its own. And some people take this even further. Some have a job running every half hour that quietly checks their inbox. And if something genuinely important has landed, the agent reaches out to them and says, there's something in your inbox you should look at now, instead of waiting to be asked. That's the mindset shift. An agent that nudges you rather than one that only ever waits for you to prompt it. And now to bring it all together, let me show you the scheduler app I built for myself. I've got a fair few scheduled jobs now, and this little dashboard shows them all in one place. What's scheduled, when each last ran, and whether it succeeded or failed. Building something like this is exactly the kind of thing we'll move on to next week. So my recommendation, start with one simple scheduled job that obviously helps. Don't build a cron empire on day one. A single timer you understand beats 10 you don't. And one guardrail, a scheduled job acts while you're not watching. So start it read only. Let it prepare things for you to approve, not send or spend, until it's earned the trust. You wouldn't hand a new assistant your bank card on day one. And now for the homework in priority order, and notice the order is the lesson. 1, author one custom command for something you actually repeat. 1 is plenty. 2, schedule one job. The digest on a timer is the obvious one, or schedule master prompt weekly. 3, only if a real job needs it, try one sub-agent. And if nothing this week needs one, don't. That's not a cop-out. That's the whole point of the keep it simple message. 4, do a simplify pass on your agent. Look at anything you've overbuilt and cut it back to a simple loop. Anything that breaks, email me, subject line S7 issue, and a one-liner. Next week's the last one, and we're going to be ambitious. We're moving you from runners to builders, the basic building blocks of building your own applications. Nothing too complicated, but the process steps, so you build some muscle memory on simple apps and grow from there. Remember, you don't need to know how to code. Your agent already has those skills. You need to know how to direct it and give solid instructions so it has a clear idea of the destination. And that's why the MCP question matters. Once you've built something valuable, like Richard's co-create method, an application is how you eventually expose it to the outside world. That's the power tools done. And the most important thing I've told you about them is when not to use them. Your agent can spin up helpers and work for you on a timer now. But the win was never complexity. It's a simple machine you actually understand. 1 session to go. Next week, you become a builder. See you Friday.